Howdy everyone, I'm Kyle Graves. I'm an intellectual property lawyer. I have a degree in electrical engineering, and I practice patent, trademark, and copyright law. I blog at kylewgraves.com and at spacelawdigest.com. Find me on LinkedIn and connect if you'd like to learn more about what I do. And now, let's get to today's topic. Today, let's discuss trademark rights and technology companies. So technology companies spend a lot of time focusing on products. But how do we brand those products? This podcast episode is going to explore a few branding basics. There are really two things you need to pay attention to when you're picking a name for a product. One, you need to pick a name that is protectable. And two, you need to pick a name that is not already being used by someone else in a way likely to be confused with your usage, or, in some instances, already subject to a pending trademark application. Very often, someone will work with a branding company to develop a list of a few potential names and then work with counsel to screen those names and protect them. So beginning with the first thing, picking a brand. Usually, a good tech company product name will suggest some feature or some compelling benefit of the product. This may be speed, efficiency, something about the feature set. However, one should not merely describe an aspect of the product. Ideally, the name will suggest some superlative feature that the product may have. For instance, in many social media apps, the selected product name suggests connectivity or velocity. Many of the green tech brands suggest some sort of conscientiousness or a sort of efficiency. Many of the crypto or Bitcoin related startups suggest something sophisticated or associated with prosperity. However, in none of these instances do the selected brands merely describe the product. This is key. One of the most important concepts in trademark law is the Abercrombie classification. This classification scheme receives its name from a case, Abercrombie & Fitch versus Hunting World. In this case, the court describes 5 categories that a mark may be categorized into. Some of these are protectable and some are not. So starting from the least protectable to the most protectable category of mark, we have first generic marks. These are not generally protectable. Then we have descriptive marks. These marks are not protectable unless secondary meaning can be established. Secondary meaning arises when consumers associate the descriptive mark with a source of a product due to significant market exposure. Moving towards even more protectability, we have suggestive marks. These marks are indeed protectable. They suggest a characteristic or a quality of the product, and they require a bit of imagination to leap from the suggestion to knowing what the product actually is. An example here is Greyhound for buses. Then we have arbitrary marks. Now, an arbitrary mark is usually a common word that is used in a context where its meaning is a malapropism or is irrelevant. An example here is Apple, but for computers. Then we have fanciful marks or inherently distinctive marks. This is an entirely invented or fanciful word, a neologism. These are highly protectable. An example here is Kodak for cameras. Now from this you can see how a suggestive mark strikes a balance between both educating consumers about the quality of your product and also being more easily protectable than descriptive marks which cannot be protected unless secondary meaning arises, or generic marks which are generally not protectable. Okay, so we've picked a name that's protectable. Now we move to the second thing that you need to pay attention to when naming a product. This is securing the brand. This is picking the name that's not already being used by someone else in a way likely to be confused, or in some instances already subject to a pending trademark application. So how do we secure the brand? Once you've picked a name, you need to make sure nobody else is using that name or one that a reasonable consumer might become confused with respect to. It doesn't have to be that you copy someone's name directly to still have potential infringement liability. This is where it's important to work with counsel. We can screen your name and provide you an assessment of the relative risks associated with different names that you're considering, and then we can protect that name. Now, in many jurisdictions, including the United States, there are both common law trademark rights and a federal registration system. Under common law rights, as soon as you begin to use that name with the product and trade, you're developing some rights. However, these rights are typically limited to the jurisdictional bounds of your market. If you're selling in Texas, you'll have rights in some or all of Texas. However, with the internet providing a global marketplace, you'll likely want bigger rights than that. A federal registration will protect your rights nationwide, and it will give you a starting point to use certain international treaties to go global. You don't have to be using the mark with the product yet to file your application to federally register the mark. Thus, as soon as you settle on a name, it's prudent to file the application. You do, however, have to demonstrate use in commerce within a certain time period thereafter. In the United States, the time period is very, very generous, so typically you'll want to pick a name, screen your name, file your application to register a federal trademark registration for that name in connection with your product, and then get back to the lab and finalize your product. You don't have to be fully market ready to start taking the steps to protect the name that you're going to take to investors and that you're going to use with your initial marketing collateral. So, just as you want to get out in front of your public release with your patents and your technology protection strategies, think about doing the same with your brand names. If today's topic got you thinking about something you'd like to discuss directly, visit my website at kylewgraves.com. That's Kyle, WGRAVES.com. Or find me on LinkedIn.